Welcome back to Two Gay Dads, episode 7. Keeping our momentum going, not letting flu season, cold season, or anything else slow us down. So, Nate, what are we going to talk about on today's show?
So this year we're talking about New Year's, what we did, what kid-friendly things we got up to for New Year's Eve this year.
We did kid-friendly things on New Year's Eve?
Well, we were feeling a little bit better, so, we were humans at least. And then we're going to talk about what the new year has in store for us, for the show, for our family. And as always, this week in the Gay Agenda.
And don't forget any pesky resolutions that we may or may not have made. Hint, I made one in 2009 and it's still going.
I believe you decided not to make any resolutions.
You can't give it away. You're giving away my resolution. It's the only one I've ever kept.
And with my signature anyway.
This is Two Gay Dads. Let's get into it. All right. So I know we were just talking about New Year's resolutions. And, Nate, how do you feel about New Year's resolutions?
I've never made any. Last year I decided I was going to, start taking better care of myself. Gym-wise, that lasted about 4 months, I think. But some of the habits that I picked up last year, actually, I kept up with. But I've never been in the habit of sitting down and making a resolution wish list. It's just never been my style. How about you?
This will surprise probably no one. I hate them. I think they're silly promises that are never kept, that don't matter, that don't make a difference, except for the one I made in 2009, which, as Nate already gave away, the only resolution I ever kept was I'm not making another resolution ever, right?
I think that spouses should get to make resolutions for their spouse.
So I get to make one for you?
Yeah, but we got to get careful with this because it has to be restricted to spouses because I don't want to get Lizzie to 14 and she starts making resolutions for the two of us.
So, we could do this. We could make resolutions for each other. And then we could, in our last episode of the year, we could see if we actually kept them. And my resolution for you is you have to be nicer to me.
Oh, well, that's never going to happen. So we'll break that right away. And I think by and at large, if we're gonna set resolutions for each other, they should probably be private and discussed over dinner with wine.
Well, maybe not private, but sure, dinner and wine. Maybe we'll ask our listeners if we can get 100 people to comment on this episode that they want us to share resolutions we make for each other. We will share them next week. So that's a challenge to people. 100 comments, 100. And we will make these resolutions public. How's that?
I would just like 100 people to be listening to us.
I think we get that. I look at the stats every day.
I don't.
So, we were having a conversation with our friend. This is one of Jason's little hot takes here. Our fellow dance parent, April, and she brought up a really good point, and maybe we could get businesses to make a resolution. And that is, can you put more changing tables in men's restrooms, please?
Oh, my God. Yes.
It's not that complicated. Those koala things can't be that expensive, right?
I think that they are surprisingly expensive, but I also think more businesses need to invest in having changing tables in men's restrooms. So I just remember we were at a restaurant in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I wanted to go up to the hostess. I was so furious. It was a poopy diaper. All parents have been there. And I'm, crouched down on the floor with my hands and knees to change a diaper because I don't have a changing table. And I wanted to go out and say, here's my new rule. If you don't have a changing table in the men's restroom, I'm going to change my kid on the hostess stand because it's just ridiculous that that we've gotten this far in the world and we don't have a place to change our kids in the men's restroom.
I think that is a great rule and something that should be done. Or at least if you have a family restroom, that if you don't want to put them in the men's room and the women's room, right? There's a whole other discussion about who cares what restrooms people use, right? But if you don't want to do that, then for God's sake, please put them in both bathrooms or make a family bathroom, because it is that floor of that restaurant, and they're lucky we're not tagging them and putting their name in them for the hundreds of people that it was disgusting.
I changed. The worst was a greasy spoon restaurant, and it was a small restaurant, and it was disgusting. It was just utterly disgusting, and I'm on my hands and knees, it was in shorts, so my knees are on the floor. It was just gross. I think that there should be a policy that employees are not allowed to use family restrooms. I know that that's going to get me into trouble because, restrooms are gendered but I get so tired of waiting with Lizzie outside of a family restroom to go in, and out pops some, 14, 16-year-old kid who just doesn't want to be bothered to have to use the public restroom. And that bugs me too, because it's like, if you have a reason to be there, that's fine. Most of these kids just don't want to use the bathroom, and the public restroom, and I hate that. It's like, because people are waiting, the customers are waiting. So I don't know.
I mean, I think it's a great question for our listeners is what's the grossest place that you've ever had to change a diaper? I'd be really curious. Comment on the show, on the podcast, send us a direct message. We'd love to read some of them on the air. What is the grossest place that you have ever changed your kid's diaper?
I did once, one time only. I changed a diaper with one hand on the beach.
That was impressive.
And she was like less than a month old.
That was really
So also
impressive.
the diaper was very little, so that helped.
And so was she.
Yes, and it wasn't poopy. So 2026. I can't. I graduated in 2005. From high school, and I just like that's where that was like a benchmark in my mind, and it's just I can't believe that's so long ago. 21 years ago. It's crazy to me.
I graduated from college in 2006, so it was 20 years ago that I graduated from college. Still makes that makes me feel old that it's been 20 years since I graduated from Hope College. But I think, as we think about what a new year means, I think, Nate, it was your sister who sent a message in our family group chat that talked about how when we turn to a new year, it's like 365 blank pages with 12 chapters that have yet to be written. And so I think that also means as we start this new book that is this new year, it's okay to breathe, to like take a minute, look around at all the chaos, whether that's in your playroom, the mountain of laundry that you can't get done, the piles of emails that you can't get through because it seems like for every one work email you send out, 6 of them come in at the same time. But it's okay to say that and say, okay, where are we now? And where do we hope we're going in the future? I think while I'm not a resolutions time, I am a reflective person. And I think it's a good pause for us to reflect on what we have going on.
I've had this conversation with some colleagues as we start to slip back into the work year that started Monday. And one of the things that we've been talking about a little bit is just that, like, we kind of just starting with a fresh perspective, but trying to find our tether or our balance, especially like stuff is crazy, folks. And it's exhausting. And there's no end in sight. In fact, the year is only going to get crazier. Trying to find a balance on the kickoff. I started this, like I said, I started this last year, trying to find my balance. I was reading more, turning the TV off more, watching less news, which, like, if you know me, I used to watch the news 24/7. It was on in my office. I worked on the Hill. It was part of my ingrained, and actually turning off the news. I actually read, I know this is crazy because it's this trite thing that everybody says these days. I read more news than I watch. And so I think, like, just talking about finding that balance and finding a way to move into the year to grasp at those strands of sanity that we still can.
I mean, I think, as we reflect on, 7 episodes into this podcast that started right around the kickoff of the holiday season, right before Thanksgiving. This is the first episode where there hasn't been a Christmas tree in the background. But if
I was just looking at the first episode the other day, I realized that.
If we've shared that 20 years ago, right, I graduated college, and 21 years ago you graduated from high school. So it wasn't that long ago that, like, this idea of two gay dads who are doing a podcast, we were a twist in a sitcom. We were the other B part, minor players, the side story, the brave exception for networks. I mean, I remember the first gay kiss on NBC on Will and Grace, and like I was expecting something more, and it was like wasn't much of a kiss, but between Will and Jack, but it meant something in that moment, right? And so, here we are now in 2026, and we're not the default, and I don't think LGBTQ parents will ever be the default, but we're not the punchline or the side story either. And that is something worth celebrating and worth lifting up, because what we want is for our kids to grow up knowing that this is normal, that our families are normal, that different doesn't mean abnormal or weird, and that it's okay to say, "Yeah, I have 2 dads. Can we talk about something interesting now?" And so, I just think that as we have this moment of reflection, it's okay to sit here and be honest and say that.
I agree. As you were saying that, I was thinking back. I remember and what case it was being heard, or maybe it was the back when there was an app to figure out what states allowed gay marriage, because there are just so few of them that there were apps that you could download on your iPhone that to show which one. And when a new one came out, and I was just thinking about, like, I remember driving when we lived in Milwaukee, driving down the lake shore with you, and it was one of those cases was coming down, and like we were listening to the news in the car, like hoping and praying. And the first blanket on the name, what was the first case before? Where
It
it
was the
felt
Prop it was the Prop 8 case in California.
That's right, and, when that case came down, we weren't together. I think you were in DC and I was in
Well, I wouldn't
Milwaukee.
know. So we were together. I was supposed to go to DC. I was the executive director of Equality Wisconsin at the time, and I had been invited to be part of the festivities that were on the mall that day outside of the Supreme Court. And my flight got delayed to the point where I wouldn't make it there in time.
But
So
we
I
weren't together when
raised.
the case got handed down.
No,
We
we
were
were not. We met up later at a local Milwaukee celebration.
so what
We
I
have
said
a
was
really
true.
cute picture. I'll find it of us
And,
kissing at that.
we also were not together when Obergefell came down because I was working on the Hill. And so I was actually at the Supreme Court that day, with my member. So,
What I
it's
do
just
remember about that day, though, because you're right, we weren't together when Oberbefell came down either. I was in New Mexico for work, wrapping up a conference, and I flew home that night, and that was the first time that they had ever lit up the White House in rainbow colors. Thank you,
That's
President
right.
Obama. We miss you very much. If Trump can run for a third term, so can you. So I'm signing my drafting petitions right now to draft you into service. But you picked me up from the airport that night, and we drove down to as close as we could park by the White House, and we walked over holding hands, and we just stood in front of the White House, and we were far from the only people there, and we just stared at the people's house lit up and saying, "You are seen. You are important. Your marriage matters. Your family matters," and it paved the way for us to be the two gay dads that we are now.
That's right.
So,
Good memories.
oh, great memories. So let's think about this year. Let's start with hopes. Nate, what are some of our hopes for 2026?
Surviving another year of parenting. A rising 6-year-old. I think hopes are we're getting ready to move. So the hope is we sell our house. We get through that move with minimal damage to whether our child is still talking to us and to our property that'll be moving with us.
Papa, if we just buy her a puppy, she'll be fine. That's what she
Oh,
keeps
no, no,
saying.
no, no. That's never going to
A
happen.
little Labrador, a little golden Labrador.
So I think that those are the things I think about just getting through it all. And there's, I mean, that's just the tip of the iceberg of the things that are either going to or not going to happen in the next year that will define what the next 10 years looks like. So what about you, Daddy?
I mean, I think there's a couple of things that go hand in hand. I hope that Lizzie, gets to continue when we can shelter her to just be a kid and not necessarily be a spokesperson or a diversity example, some statistic in somebody's PowerPoint, but just a kid who loves her dance class, wants to go to dance. Maybe she gets into, something else, right? Survives the move, makes new friends in her new school, and maybe continues to just, like, I don't know what it is about our kid, but she hates wearing socks and she takes them off in the weirdest places, and she leaves them in the weirdest places. Like, how the heck did we end up in a position where the sock is over here? Like, how did my kid even reach there? I don't know, right? But in the same vein, I hope that it gives us the opportunity for us as a couple to be more than just parents. Our jobs are exhausting. Being attentive and good parents is equally exhausting. And I think, we need to make sure a commitment I want to make. I'm not going to call it a resolution. We have these beautiful date nights on Thursdays, and they matter when we're here. And I hope that we can find a babysitting network in our new home that allows us to continue to have that date night. Because you're not my roommate. I'm not just living with you. You're my partner in life, and I love you, and I want to not just try to co-manage a 5-year-old little terrorist.
And I'd like 2026 to be more agreeing, date nights than dentist appointments, more conversations that are reminiscing about our life together and planning a bright future forward. And it's the silly everyday stuff, right? It's the, Saturday morning when we pray to God that Lizzie's let us sleep, past 7, and Daddy makes breakfast on the Blackstone, or seeing Lizzie continue to grow into not just a human who knows her own mind and her own spirit, but also knows how to defend those around her, her friends, and her own ideas. And so I just those simple joys of parenting and getting to raise a little person.
Well, I think you just did a really great transition because we talked about our hopes, but we've got some joys. We've got some things that we're, looking forward to, because we have to be more than just hopeful. We have to have joy, stuff that fills up. And, there's some of those things that are joyful for me are just, listen, we've been together for a long time, and like we don't always get excited when we come back from the grocery store, but our kid does. And so, or you come back from that work trip and you hear daddy's home or papa, and she comes running around the corner to just give you that big hug, right? The joy of a family vacation.
I think
We,
you just described a Labrador.
well, I told you, Lizzie says if she gets a puppy, she'll be fine with the
So she'll
move,
just be the
right?
puppy until then.
So, or we
No,
just
I
get her a
agree.
puppy, right? Like we should absolutely just get her a puppy. Like, look, he said it. We're getting ourselves a puppy. We'll post pictures soon. The
So
people
it's
listening
been great
can't
to
see
do
you
two gay
shaking your
dads
head.
because I'll be filing for divorce. No, and I agree though. And there's that when we get home from a trip and she runs down the hallway and she's excited. There's nothing like that. And it's also, we're gonna be raising our kid in Washington D.C. on this country's 250th birthday. I think we're gonna have to be really, especially in the current environment, judicious about what we choose to expose her to and take her to, because there are always safety concerns. Thank goodness our office is downtown DC. So, there's a place to park that's safe. There's a place to fallback point that's safe. But, I'd love to take her to some of that stuff to get to see that. And, getting pride in a big city that she's never, the family part of part of pride that she's never gotten to be a part of, that, but also teaching her that this isn't just a once a year, a day of joy, but it's also a day-to-day act of rebellion against those who continue to choose to try to take our rights away.
I really do look forward to, and don't get me wrong, I love where we live. I love Ludington. I love our friends. I love the family of choice that we have built here. I do look forward to having other LGBTQ people in our data. We have people that connected through work. We have friends and friendships that we have maintained that are all over the country. But I look forward to that being more of a part of our everyday life. I look forward to. I have joy when I think about doing more with the Rainbow Families group in DC. And so again, for Lizzie to not feel like her family's the only family that looks like this, which it can in some parts of America when you're the only LGBTQ couple raising a kid. It can feel like that to us. It can feel like that to our kid. It's part of why we started this podcast, which was to build this community that we've felt isolated or alone from. And that is not a criticism or a knock on our dear close friends here. It is just sometimes there are concerns that an LGBTQ person has that it's just easier to talk with another LGBTQ person about.
I look forward to her having being exposed to families like ours. I think that'll be it's good for her. And we've had this conversation with our friends here. This is nothing that they haven't heard before, which is just that we do look forward to having a community of people, of families that look like ours, that Lizzie can grow up knowing that this isn't abnormal. In a lot of places, this is becoming normal. And I think that's really important for her development. So and then, there are the worries as we go into this next year. I just described, safety as one, moving her to a big city, moving her to the center of whatever comes down the road this year, to moving her to the center today. We're recording this on January 6th, moving her back to the place where that happened, in a time when we live in an environment of continuing political anger and violence. So there are those worries. I think any parent would have them. I have them because we live in a very safe environment now, and moving her out of that into a city does bring up some concerns.
Yeah, listen, the last few years legislatively have been really bad for the LGBT community, especially for our trans siblings. And if you've listened to the gay agenda, a lot of what we've talked about have been things that give us anxiety. Hint, we've got something positive that we'll share in the gay agenda today, but part of it is just about, informing our listeners, our community, about the threats that the LGBT community is facing. And so when people say they're worried or scared, is because there are hundreds of pieces of anti LGBTQ, anti queer, anti trans legislation that are introduced in every state legislative session in all states, including Michigan where we live, every single year. And, part of my job is I have to monitor and track and work with partners around state legislative sessions. This is a busy time of the year for me, and I don't work in the LGBTQ space, right? But I still hear the legislation, and it is scary.
We, but on a micro level, that's macro, big picture. On the micro level, there's a fear that Lizzie will decide that she wants to play soccer, and I
Oh
am
yeah,
not a soccer mom.
we can
We
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 can
have a
get a
friend,
van.
our friend Kelly, who did an episode. We talked about this a little bit when she was on with us. Like, she gets into, like, her daughter is into all kinds of stuff.
Last spring, her daughter, and she was on the show, and so we talked about. So this feels fair game. Sorry, Kelly, I know you're probably listening, but during spring last year, her daughter was doing dance, t-ball, and soccer. And again, she's a single mom by choice. Part of the reason why we think she's so wonderful and such an inspiration for us is because she does all those things. We're exhausted from our jobs. There's two of us, and just taking her to dance one day a week.
I feel like there's judgment coming our way, but also I
Well,
literally just had
there's
I
deserved judgment coming our way.
I had drinks with Kelly yesterday, and she had an S written on her hand, and I said, "Are you forgetting what your name is?" And she goes, "No, it's so that I remember that I need to sign up for soccer. Want to sign up?" And I said, "No, we're moving." So, there's those micro level of, I dance is good. Soccer, I'm not sure I have it in me, but of course, if Lizzie wants to do it, I will. It's going to be that or the puppy. So, I guess soccer. She go off to soccer. She goes.
Listen, just to maybe tone down the deserved judgment and eye rolling that is coming our way from everybody out there. Like, we hear you, we feel you. This isn't we're just recording the episode, and I already feel it. Lizzie has also never asked to play soccer, so we've never told her no. I think that's fair. We haven't told
That
her
is
no,
true,
we're not going to play.
and
She
we
has
wouldn't. We
never
wouldn't if she
We
asked.
wouldn't. If she asked to play, we wouldn't tell her no. So to our friends listening, also, like, don't. I know what you're all thinking. Everyone who's listening knows what you're thinking. But just
But there's also the competitive soccer parents who are like, "Yes, don't let him do it. It's crazy. You don't want to be part of that." So I feel like there's both sides to that. We have the same people that say, "Don't tell us don't get into competitive dance." So,
and here we are.
can she just be quiet and read in her room? I don't know.
So,
The introvert in
there's
me is
also
wants our kid to be an introvert, but she's not.
the in you is introverting.
The introvert in me is introvert. Yeah, that's true. While you two extrovert all over the place.
Well, that's what we do. So listen, maybe, just maybe, for two gay dads in 2026, what it might mean, what we might be able to do is maybe we can balance this tension between hope, joy, and worry, right? And we can use joy as the thread that pulls the year together. That as we write our story for the year, as we write our chapters, as we write our pages for this new year and fill up this new book, maybe it's things we start trying to double down on the things we can control and the things we can't. How do we show up for our kids? Tonight, I had to be on a work call right before we're recording this podcast, and we're trying to figure out when to do it. I said it can't be till after 7:30 because I've got to show up for my kid today. I'm leaving on a work trip tomorrow. I've got to go get on an airplane. I'm going to have this time with my kid. So I can do it, but it's not going to be till after 7:30 after she goes to bed. And you know what? To my colleagues' credit, they all got it. And not only did they get it, they were supportive of it. So, maybe it's this year that we double down on those things we can control, how we show up for our kids, how we show up for each other, how we use this platform to build community so that we don't feel so alone. We don't get overwhelmed by the nonsense that is this world, but we realize that, like anything else, there's far much more that we have in common than divides us.
Absolutely. I think you put that very well. I think there's a big world outside that we can't control, but we can control what we bring home. I think that goes to us as individuals and the choices that we make. It goes to us as leaders and organizations and also as managers and saying if the house isn't on fire, we need to put our families first because at a time like this, families need to be first. And so we need to give people the space to be parents and family centered first in those after hours so that we are not only expecting but promoting good balance for folks in our lives. And I think that we have to look for the joy and the simple things of being parents. I don't have much to add because you covered it very well.
It's the simple things like just making sure that our bedtime stories end with telling kids that they are loved exactly as they are for who they are on the inside and the outside. In a world where every kid just knows that they are loved unconditionally. That is what 2026 can mean. I think it's what we should make it mean, right? And so let's just commit to each other, to those listening to this podcast. And if you do hit the like button in the middle of this, we'll know that it's happening right now. But just like let's make this a year where our joys and our hopes are louder than our worries, where progress outpaces backlash, and where kids can look back on 2026 and say that was the year the world started to return to normal.
Absolutely. Oh, Daddy, what's in store for us in 2026 on the show?
So, what's in store for the show this year? We are going to have some fellow podcasters on the show this year who also talk about parenting. We're going to have other couples or individuals who have adopted their children or formed their families through non traditional routes to share their stories to continue to prove our thesis behind this show, which it is love makes a family, not a template, not a toolkit. It is just all about love. We've been connected with lots of people already. We're still in the process of doing outreach. It got slowed down over the holidays with us being sick. If you are interested in coming on our show or you know someone that's interested in coming to the show, go ahead and send us a DM on social media and we'll be sure to follow up with you. But I think we've got a really exciting year ahead, and we're going to continue to talk about, of course, the gay agenda and what's happening in the world. And I think it's going to be a really great for the Two Gay Dads podcast. You've written a
Looking forward
book.
to it.
You've written your first book. We might get that published. Who
Who
knows?
knows? We'll see.
Hope. Hope.
Indeed. So this week in the gay agenda, I was reading a story today on Americans are leaving Christianity because of anti-LGBT animus and why now. And so it quoted a 2024 PRRI. PRRI, by the way, if you're looking for a research firm that really packages information, it's usually really it's just institute, so it's usually religious, but it breaks down polling by faith groups, which is interesting. So you're getting where are you flying with Catholics, Baptists, Methodists? It kind of breaks things down in that way. It just breaks things down in a really interesting way. As we know, I like numbers. But it said in 2024, PRRI found that 47% of Americans who left their faith cited uh, treatment of LGBT people as the reason. That's up from 29% in 2016. So I thought that was interesting.
That's a huge increase.
And
Right, like
among
it
those
only
under 30, it's 60%.
I mean, it doesn't. 17 points or 18 points, excuse me, I can't math. Doesn't sound until you realize that's hundreds of thousands of people who are walking away from their chosen faith because how their faith is choosing to talk about or interact with the LGBTQ community. That's incredible. I
The
also think in reading that same article, Nate, I also think it's politics and the pulpit have no place together, right? And we have separation of church and state for a reason. And there's 1 out of 5 Americans is leaving their church because they feel it's become a political tool, regardless of what side of the aisle you're on, and not a place where you build community. Faith is supposed to unite. Politics does not unite. Politics is divisive by its very design. There are multiple parties and multiple sides, and that is not a vision of unity. Faith is supposed to unite us and bring us back together. And when you start mixing the two, you start using faith to divide people.
That's exactly it. So I thought that was interesting. It's always interesting to share just the stats. We are people of faith. We are C&E Christians these days. We want to find our way back to going to church more regularly. The article did detail, and I'll cover this, and then we can move on to the next article. But 31% cite it's because of abuse scandals. 32% cite mental health concerns, and thirds of Gen Z women say churches don't treat men and women equally. I hear all the time churches saying, "We want to grow, and why don't these kids come to church?" The institution needs to change, and the body of faith has always responded throughout history to societal changes and norms. And you can do it within a tenets of faith, and there's a way to do that. There are plenty of churches that are doing it. If your church isn't, and you want to see that change, there are plenty of resources about how you can lead into making change in your community of faith. The Methodist Church is going through United Methodist Church is going through radical change right now, and I think out of that the historians are going to write dozens of case studies about how your community of faith can absorb change and not lose its identities. Onward to 2026. Let's hope that churches continue to see the light, as it were.
We also mentioned earlier that 2025 was not a great year for the LGBTQ community in state legislatures. According to the Human Rights Campaign, there was over 260 pieces of discriminatory legislation introduced in all 50 states. But if you think it was bad for the L's, the G's, and the B's, 2025 was devastating for trans rights and for the movement and the support that had been done for advancing equality for our trans siblings. And Trump's second term has brought in an untold number of executive orders targeting trans people, including bans on gender affirming care, restrictions in passports. And the Supreme Court recently upheld Tennessee's ban on gender affirming care for minors. That just means that there is more attacks on the horizon. I mentioned earlier that there's some good news, right? And so I look to a place like Equality, Florida, where they've been fighting back on all sorts of terrible anti-LGBTQ laws. And what they've started to find is that they've expanded their lobby day program to 2 consecutive weeks in Tallahassee, right? It's a short legislative session. It's not incredibly long in Florida. It'll be over by the end of March. But having that consistent presence of constituents from all across the state is having a huge impact on reducing the number of bills that are getting hearings or getting. So for other states who are wondering what to do, talk to your statewide equality organization. They exist in almost every state. You can check out the Equality Federation's website to get a list of your state. But I would just urge you all, have that consistent presence from your members, from LGBTQ people in the Capitol during the session. It is harder to legislate against people. It's harder to legislate hate when people are there. And so there are proven tactics that we know work, and that is one of them.
I know that you and I both sat through some trainings and on how sustained advocacy and sustained voices being loud and heard is the only way to fight back what's happening in our country. And these are good examples, or that's a very good example. There are others of showing up, being heard. It does matter. I know it. We've all, if you're from the progressive space, we've all found ourselves standing on a picket line or somewhere at some point, and it feels like that car drives by and it honks, and you wonder if those people really do care. It does matter. Being visible does matter, and it is the only way that we get to save everything that we love about this country. So if we want to make it to 251 years, we got to keep fighting.
We got to keep, and people are fighting back, right? The Human Rights Campaign, right? Their foundation, their 501c3 arm, launched and filed a massive, historic level class action lawsuit against Trump over the denial of gender affirming care as part of federal employees' benefits. And, the one place where everyone who's been part of ensuring that America is a country for all of its people, is in the courts. We have been very successful. Well, while it's not always perfect, right? And we can always point to cases where a judge got it wrong or the Supreme Court got it wrong. We have been effective at pushing back some of these authoritarian power grabs that we've been seeing through the courts, right? And so kudos to the Human Rights Campaign for filing that class action lawsuit against against that new discriminatory policy against our trans siblings. Those are the ways we fight back. Those are the ways we stand united and we say America is a country for all, by all, and filled with love, not just a select few.
And I know a lot of us go into the election cycles and we talk about judicial candidates and nobody's listening or nobody cares. This stuff matters right now more than ever. We just watched the movie Nuremberg, and I was watching a kind of documentary about the ideas and the principles of Nuremberg, and they talked about how two of the first principles when it all went sideways at the beginning of the Holocaust was that they made it legal. They twisted the law. What happened was legal under their laws. And then they destroyed the books. People lost their individual identities. And so these things that are happening, and I'm not at all saying that that's where we are, but these things do matter. And it is the tried and true methods that are used to tear down countries and systems like ours.
So let's close out our gay agenda today with a shout out to a city who did something amazing in an unexpected place. Well, last year during the state legislative session, the state of Utah, in their brilliance, it wasn't really brilliance, decided to pass a state law, forget freedom of speech, to ban all pride flags from any government building or entity. Pride flags, Black Lives Matters flags, trans flags, you name it. The only flags allowed are the United States flag, the state of Utah flag, and the MIA POW flag. All three of those flags, cool. But why do you have to legislate down to the other level? Well, you know what the city of Salt Lake did?
Salt Lake, of all places.
Salt Lake City, Utah. They adopted the pride flag, the trans flag, the bisexual flag, and the Black Lives Matter flag as official city flags. And since it is an official city flag, they are now allowed to fly them whenever they want.
That on your fascist pipe and smoke it.
Amen. So we told you there'd be some good news in the gay agenda. So what are we doing on the big gay agenda this year? We're using our super magic powers to get pride flags adopted as official city flags. Way to go, Salt Lake. Proud of you.
Indeed. Well done. So, Daddy, what did you learn from your daughter this week?
Well, I know yours is going to be about how she's a tattletale, so I'll share a little bit of a different one. So we've talked frequently about the fact that I have to travel. I've been lucky that I've been able to be home for about a month because of the holidays, and Lizzie's gotten very attached to us being home. And Sunday, I left the house for a few hours to go watch the Detroit Lions beat the Chicago Bears. Go Lions to end the season with some friends. And Lizzie was all upset that I was leaving the house. Like, no, take me with me. You don't go. Watch the game here. It was very sweet, or so I thought. And then you just realize how much of a manipulator our little 5-year-old is. Because of that being fresh in my mind, I went today before she went to bed. I had her sit in my lap and told her that, hey, Daddy's going to have to go on a work trip. He's going to be gone for 2 sleeps. Okay. So I can go on a work trip and be gone for 2 days. No problem.
Well, wait until I told you this.
I go to my buddy's house to watch a football game. Oh, don't go, Daddy.
I told you this. Watch. Tomorrow morning, all hell is going to break loose. So just be prepared.
I have no doubt, but I firmly believe that it's all just an act of manipulation, not true sadness. I think she's adjusted to the fact that we travel for work, and sure, she'd love that we're home more, but I think she uses it to get what she wants.
Yep.
Nay.
Mine, our daughter is a narc. He sold me up a river.
He sure did.
She's 5.5. She's night training now, or she's on the end of night training. She's doing really well. We're very proud of her. We waited until she asked, and she still has the rails up on her bed, and so it's time to take those down. She's old enough, and they're too hard to get out to go potty, so it's one less barrier. And I said, at the new year, we're going to take them out. We're done. Well, I've neglected to consult the princess on
How
a
dare
decision
you.
I had made
How
about
dare you.
my household. And
She should have a union.
I removed her bed rails, and she told me off. She came upstairs and she said that was not my decision to make on my own, that it was her room. We should have at least had a conversation about it. We hugged it out. I thought we were done. Oh no. Daddy came home and he went down to take her, we take her to the bathroom right before we go to bed, and went down to take her to the bathroom, go to bed. She narked on me.
She sure did. Half asleep, rubbing her eyes. I'm carrying her to the bathroom because, she had to have up, which is her word. Like, Papa took my rails down and he didn't talk to me. She told on you.
I think the lesson here is apparently I need to at least consult the princess, even if I don't care what
it's a
about her
process
opinion.
called.
At least I'm supposed to consult.
See, it's a process called consult and decide. You consult and then you also decide, and you get what you want.
Yeah. Weren't we told long before we had kids, don't give them options though? I don't.
We sure were. Well, listen, that is episode 7. What a great episode, sharing our hopes, our joys, and our concerns for the year. We love doing this podcast. We hope you love listening to it as much as we love doing it for you all. Please go ahead and continue to help our following grow. Like us, subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on social media, hit that like button. And Nate, why don't you close out our show today?
I'm just going to end it on this. May the light of the holidays remind us that we are working toward a future rooted in justice, compassion, and unity. Onward with love and resolve to 2026. So, to our friends, onward.